my top political advisor is somebody who's a descendant of Holocaust survivors. My closeness to the Jewish American community was probably what propelled me to the U.S. Senate. And my not just knowledge but sympathy and identification with the Jewish experience is rooted in part because of the historic connection between the African American freedom movement here in the United States and the civil rights efforts of Jewish Americans and some of the same impulses that led to the creation of Israel. And so I think what this arises from, some of it may just be the fact that my middle name is Hussein, and that creates suspicion. Some of it may have to do with the fact that I have actively reached out to the Muslim community. And I think that sometimes, particularly in the Middle East, there's the feeling of, the friend of my enemy must be my enemy. And the truth of the matter is that my outreach to the Muslim community is designed precisely to reduce the antagonism and the dangers posed by a hostile Muslim world to Israel and to the West.
So that fear, the tangible fear that some Israelis have that their best ally in the world might abandon them is...
Yeah, well, it's pretty hard to square with the fact that not only have I, in every speech that I've ever given, talked about the unbreakable bond to Israel. Not only did I describe that special relationship and condemn those who would try to drive a rift between us in Cairo in front of a Muslim audience, but if you look at our actions, and Prime Minister Netanyahu will confirm this, and even critics I think will have to confirm, that the United States under my administration has provided more security assistance to Israel than any administration in history. And we've got greater security cooperation between our two countries than at any time in our history. And the single most important threat to Israel, Iran, and its potential possession of a nuclear weapon, has been my #1 foreign policy priority over the course of the last 18 months. So, it's hard to, I think, look at that track record and look at my public statements and in any way think that my passions for Israel's survival, its security, and its people are in any way diminished.
You mentioned Iran, and obviously you instituted tough sanctions against Iran. You said that with the meeting with Netanyahu. How long are you going to give the Iranian president, and what are you willing to do if he continues with his nuclear program?
Well, what I've said consistently is that it is unacceptable for Iran to possess a nuclear weapon, that we're going to do everything we can to prevent that from happening. What I've also tried to do is build an international consensus so that Iran can't somehow play a victim, can't suggest somehow that they're being singled out by the West. They are the only country that has not been able to convince the International Atomic Energy Agency that they are pursuing nuclear power for peaceful means. It's not hard to do, but they haven't been able to do it because all indicators are that they are, in fact, pursuing a nuclear weapon. So we just pursued the toughest sanctions that have ever been applied against the Iranian government. We followed those up with U.S. sanctions that are going to be tough. Allies and partners are following up with those sanctions. We want to continually ratchet up the costs of them pursuing this nuclear program. Now, will that work? We don't know. And we are going to continue to keep the door open for diplomatic resolution of this challenge. But I assure you that I have not taken options off the table.
Are you concerned that Prime Minister Netanyahu might try unilaterally to, attack Iran?
You know what? I think that the relationship that the U.S. and Israel is sufficiently strong that neither of us try to surprise each other, but we try to coordinate on issues of mutual concern, and that approach is one that I think Prime Minister Netanyahu is committed to.
You know, I must ask you, I was, forgive me for getting nostalgic, I was here, well not here, in Chicago, the night of the election, and I remember seeing that great mass of people and looking at them and looking at you and thinking there is no man on earth that is capable of, you know, living up to those expectations. Did you feel that burden?
Oh, absolutely. Look, you know, our campaign, I think, became a repository for a lot of hopes and a lot of dreams, and I think that's a good thing. Mm-hmm. But we understood that governance is different from campaigning. It's hard, it's complicated, it involves making choices, some of them not very attractive choices, and that at any given stage there are going to be some people who are disappointed. Mm-hmm. But what keeps me hopeful is not any oversized view of my own capabilities. What keeps me hopeful is that the more I meet people here in this country, the more I meet people abroad, the more convinced I am that there's a common humanity, a common set of aspirations that people have for their children. I think there's a core decency to people that sometimes history, institutions, lack of opportunity prevent from being realized, and that the general trajectory of history is in a positive direction. But it takes time, and so, you know, my job is to do my small part to move the ball forward. You know, one of my favorites phrases is from Martin Luther King, who said the arc of the moral universe is long, but it bends towards justice. And I believe that, and I think that that's consonant with Jewish traditions. You know, that sense that if we are working hard, if we apply the principles of tikkun and repairing the world, that it's possible for us not to create a perfect world, but one that's a little more just, a little more fair, a little better for our children. I continue to believe that.
My final question, Mr. President. Much has been made about, obviously, your historic victory and being the first African-American president. Can I ask you to share with us that moment where the enormity of the historic significance sort of hit you?
I don't think it still has hit me yet.
Really?
You know, we were just talking about how you broke some ground as a woman anchor, and I'm sure that's not what you think about every day. You think about, can I get this story done? You know, am I performing in a way that meets my standards? And that's how you feel when you're in the presidency. I think you have a lot of responsibilities and a lot of concerns, and each day you are just trying to make sure that you are A, doing the best you can, B, making sure that you're making decisions for the right reason. And I do think that there have been moments in the presidency when I'm making a decision about deploying young men and women into the battlefield, or, you know, we're making very consequential decisions about the world economy, and where you know, the answers are not always 100% obvious, and you're making judgment calls. And it's during those moments where you are reminded that you can't behave like a politician. You can't put your finger out to the wind. You can't base your actions on polls. You have to make a decision on what you think is right. And